she was never seen without her lashes done. Not once. Even when she was reversing a muddy Audi down a country lane at 40 miles per hour, sunglasses on, barely a glance at the neighbors. No one saw her work, no one asked questions, but people noticed things. The cars, the dogs, the strange hours. And then, one morning, the silence broke. Marked units flooded the narrow roads. Officers poured into the fields behind the old farmhouse. What they found would shake the village and set off a chain of events that ended with a courtroom and an empty dock. This is the story of the housewife who built a drug empire in rural Wales and how she disappeared before justice caught up with her. To most, they were just another rural family, the kind who kept to themselves, lived off the land, and didn't mix much in the village. The Laysons arrived in Capeldewi a few years before the raid, settling at a modest small holding on the edge of the village. The property was run down but private, surrounded by trees and set back from the road. From a distance, it looked like any other farmhouse on the outskirts of Carmarthen. But it didn't take long for the whispers to start. There were the cars, second-hand BMWs and Audis, sometimes without plates, the comings and goings at strange hours, the smell of cannabis that hung on certain days, drifting through hedges and over fences. And then there were the dogs, a pack of Dobermans, Malamutes and Rottweilers, always barking, always watching. Locals described Lynn as polite but standoffish, always well-groomed, always sharply dressed. She didn't work, and she didn't talk about what she did. To anyone passing by, it looked like early retirement. But to those who lived nearby, it felt off, because this wasn't the Laysons' first home. Before Capeldewi, they'd lived in Caedweli, a different town, with the same quiet unease, the same barking dogs, the same rumours. And when they sold that house in 2019, just days after a visit from men in suits demanding money, they disappeared overnight, only to reappear here, with a new postcode and a bigger plan. It didn't run like a crew, it ran like a household. Lynn Layson wasn't the sort of figure you'd expect to sit at the top of a drug operation. No shouting, no flashy jewellery. But she ran the whole thing, from the house, from the fields, from behind the gates. Prosecutors would later describe her as the one giving direction, the one coordinating not just the product, but the people. Her husband Stephen brought something else, a reputation that followed him wherever he went. He'd already served time for grievous bodily harm. Neighbours in Capeldewi described him as unpredictable, someone whose temper came without warning. There were stories. A bin thrown at a neighbour, a row that ended with threats, a stare from the balcony that made people turn away. Then there was Samson, their son. Still young, barely in his 20s, but not naive. He was often seen in the family's vehicles, including the old ice cream van they brought from Caedweli. It made short, sharp journeys through the village. No one ever saw what went in, or what came out. But delivery didn't just happen on roads. The family used quad bikes to cut through nearby forestry, avoiding traffic, bypassing cameras. Their meeting point was a lay-by on the A48, a quiet stretch where packages were passed in seconds. No words, no lingering, just one bag handed off and the engine gone. The supply wasn't local, this was regional. Cocaine and cannabis distributed to dealers across Carmarthenshire, Swansea, Pembrokeshire. At least 2 sub-dealers were later identified. One went by the name Mr. Pickles. Neighbours said nothing, not out of respect, but fear. And in the space of a few quiet years, a family farm became the backbone of a rural drug network. It started just before sunrise. On the morning of the 27th of October, 2021, police moved in on Piber Farm. Armed officers, search teams and dogs swept through the yard without warning. Roads were blocked off. There was no time for anyone inside to hide a thing. The search didn't finish in a few hours. It went on for 2 full days. Every part of the property was covered. Sheds, caravans, kennels, even the overgrown fields. At one point, a sniffer dog named Billy was taken out for a break. As he crossed a hedgerow, he stopped, sat down. Officers followed his lead and found a green bag hidden in the undergrowth. Inside, 592 grams of cocaine, clean and packaged, with a street value of up to £60,200. That was just the start. Inside, police uncovered 1.4 kilograms of cannabis, some stashed in a shed, some inside a suitcase in the corner of a field. In the main building, they found digital weighing scales dusted with white powder. Cash was everywhere, tucked into drawers, folded inside bags. When questioned, the family claimed it came from a house sale. The officers didn't buy it. But the most serious discovery came from the ceiling. In a canvas bag, wedged inside a cavity, they found a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, modified to fire live ammunition. It was an Italian model, rare in the UK, and the first of its kind ever seized by Dyfed Powys police. Until then, the village had only guessed what the Laysons were capable of. Now, there was no room for doubt. The house wasn't just a base of operations. It was fortified, prepared, and supplied. And for the police, this wasn't a hunch anymore. It was a case. After the raid, the village finally started talking. People admitted they'd always felt something wasn't right at the farm. The smell of cannabis, the loud dogs, the cars coming and going late at night. But no one had ever said anything, not publicly. Some were scared. They'd seen what happened to those who spoke up. One neighbor said their tires were slashed after they reported something to the police. Another remembered being stared down from the balcony. Others just felt it was safer to keep their heads down. Back in Kidwelly, where the Laysons lived before, things were even worse. The house was a mess, the dogs never stopped howling, and one resident said the stress of living next to them nearly put them in hospital. In Capeldewi, the Laysons kept a lower profile. Lynn was always well dressed, Stephen was polite when he wanted to be, and Samson didn't say much. They didn't mix with the community, but they didn't cause open trouble either. After the arrests, some locals said they were shocked, others weren't. They seemed normal. One neighbor told reporters, "Maybe a bit rough, but you'd never think it was that serious." In May 2023, the case finally reached court. Lynn, Stephen and Samson Layson all stood trial at Swansea Crown Court. The charges were serious: conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to supply cannabis, and possession of criminal property. Stephen faced an additional charge for possession of a firearm. It had taken months of work to get to this point: the raid, the forensics, the financial investigations, and the witness statements. Prosecutors laid it all out: the scale of the operation, the money seized, the gun hidden in the ceiling. But more than anything, they focused on control. Lynn wasn't just involved, she was in charge. Described in court as the dominant force behind the network, she was the one directing others, managing the movement of drugs, and controlling how it all operated from the farmhouse. Stephen's role was physical. He helped move drugs, handled the money, and, as the court heard, had no hesitation, using threats or violence when needed. Samson, still in his early 20s, was seen as a runner, involved in delivery, transport, and the day-to-day movement of stock. All three were found guilty by the jury. The evidence was too detailed to ignore: drugs, cash, weapons, and movement traced across counties. Sentencing was scheduled for July. 2 of them returned to face it. 1 did not. On 21st July 2023, the courtroom was ready. Stephen was there, Samson was there, but the woman who ran it all wasn't. Lynn Layson never walked through the doors of Swansea Crown Court that morning. She'd skipped bail, disappeared, and within hours a bench warrant was issued for her arrest. Stephen Layson was sentenced to 11 years and 4 months. His record, his role, and the firearm charge made him the most dangerous in the eyes of the court. Samson, just 21, was given 6 years. The judge accepted he was following his parents' lead, but made clear he still had a choice. A few weeks later, she was sentenced in her absence to 9 years in prison. The judge said she had no doubt Lynn had made a deliberate choice, not a mistake, not a delay, but a calculated move to avoid justice. From that point on, she was no longer just a drug boss. She was one of the UK's most wanted. But going missing was only the first step. Staying missing, that's what made it a manhunt. Police called it Operation Hillston, a dedicated manhunt. It wasn't just a case of checking old addresses. This was bigger. Regional teams, surveillance work, national databases, and public appeals. Crime Stoppers added Lynn Layson to its most wanted list. News outlets ran the story. Her photo went out on social media. A £1,000 reward was offered for information leading to her arrest. At first, the leads were promising. Tips came in from across the UK. Some said she was still in Wales, hiding in rural properties. Others claimed she'd fled abroad, possibly to Thailand, where her father once lived. There were whispers of fake names, cash reserves, and family members helping her lie low. Police followed every lead. They searched homes in Carmarthen, Swansea, and rural parts of Pembrokeshire, checked vehicles linked to her family, ran mobile numbers, bank records, and border movements. But nothing. She didn't leave a digital trail. There were no ATM withdrawals, no phone activity, no sightings on camera. Detectives believed she hadn't done it alone, that someone, or several people, were helping her stay hidden. But whoever was helping, they were careful. There were no mistakes, no second chances. Weeks turned into months. Posters faded, tips dried up. And still, Lynn Layson stayed missing. Not arrested, not found, not even seen. For over a year, it was like she'd vanished into thin air. She'd been gone for over a year. No sightings, no movement, no signs. Then, in August 2024, everything changed. Police received fresh intelligence, specific, local, and credible. The details haven't been made public. But whatever came in was strong enough to act on. Officers moved quickly, not to a border, not to a ferry terminal or an airport, but to a location in South Wales. Lynn Layson hadn't left the country at all. She was still in Wales, living quietly under a different name. It wasn't a dramatic arrest. No chase, no struggle. Just a quiet knock, confirmation of identity, and a woman who had run out of road. She was taken into custody, also taken in a 26-year-old woman, held on suspicion of assisting an offender. She was later released on bail. The arrest wasn't dramatic, but it was final. After more than a year as one of the UK's most wanted, Lynn Layson was back in police custody at the same farm she once turned into a drug supply hub. Lynn Layson didn't face a new trial. The sentence had already been passed. 9 years in prison, handed down in her absence in July 2023 after she failed to appear in court. Now that she was back in custody, there was nothing more to argue. She was processed and transferred into the prison system to begin serving that term. Dyfed Powys Police confirmed the arrest to the public days later. They said she had been located in Carmarthenshire, arrested without incident, and was now beginning her prison sentence. If you followed this case, we want to hear your thoughts. What do you make of the sentencing and the year she spent on the run? How do you think she was finally caught? Let us know below. For more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. There's always another case to uncover.